evening. Today is Tuesday, August 14th. Can I call to order the meeting and have the opening statement and roll call, please?
Let the minutes reflect that adequate notice of the holding of this regular meeting of the Howell Township Council was provided for in the following manner: by the posting of a copy of said notice upon the bulletin board in the Township Municipal Building on January 5, 2018, by the faxing of a copy of said notice to the Tri-Town News, Asbury Park Press, and Star Ledger for information and publication on January 5, 2018, by the filing of a copy of said former notice in the Township Clerk's Office on January 5, 2018. The public will be allowed to attend and will be allowed to participate pursuant to the Open Public Meetings Law. The public is reminded that civility and decorum will be maintained during the meeting. Any contracts awarded at this meeting or between now and the next meeting will be required to comply with the requirements of Public Law 1975, Chapter 127. In accordance with the Fire Prevention Code, be advised that this facility is designed with emergency exits for your safety. Upon exiting the meeting room, they are to your left and to your right. Furthermore, smoking is not permitted in the municipal building. Please take note that this meeting is being videotaped for possible future broadcast on Howell Television. Roll call, Mrs. O'Donnell.
Here.
Mrs. Smith will join us later this evening via phone. Mr. Walsh.
Here.
Mr. Nicastro.
Here.
Mayor Berger has an excused absence this evening.
Thank you. Brian, we have reason to go into executive session?
Yes, sir, we do. Items pertaining to litigation, attorney-client privilege, and contract negotiations.
Thank you. Penny, can you read the resolution?
Whereas the governing body of the Township of Howell is authorized pursuant to NJSA 10:4-12 to exclude the public from that portion of the meeting for purposes of discussing specific matters as permitted by NJSA 10:4-12, whereas the governing body of the Township of Howell intends to discuss certain matters which are deemed confidential pursuant to NJSA 10:4-12, whereas at this time the governing body of the Township of Howell cannot determine the time when the discussion to be held in executive session will be made public, but will disclose the minutes of executive session when the need for confidentiality no longer exists. Now therefore be it resolved by the governing body of the Township of Howell that this meeting shall be adjourned to an executive session, and the public will be excluded in order that the governing body of the Township of Howell may discuss the items previously listed. And upon reconvening this public meeting, the presiding officer will announce, if possible, the time when and the circumstance under which a discussion conducted in executive session will be disclosed to the public.
Thank you. Can I have a motion, please, in a second?
Motion to go into executive?
Second.
Roll call, Mrs. O'Donnell.
Yes.
Mr. Walsh.
Yes.
Mr. Nicastro.
Yes. For the benefit, we will be back at 7:30.
You turn off my phone.
Good evening, everyone. Today is Tuesday, August 14, 2018, council regular meeting. Just I have to make a statement. Executive session minutes from tonight's meeting can be disclosed to the public when the need for confidentiality no longer exists. Can you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence for our troops and our first responders serving all around the world and local.
I'll let you know when I'm up.
It'll never work again.
Just some house cleaning. I needed a motion for acceptance of minutes for the July 17, 2018.
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes of July 17th, 2018.
I'll second.
Roll call, Mrs. O'Donnell.
Yes.
Mr. Walsh.
Yes.
Mr. Nicastro.
Yes, thank you. Okay, can we, reports of officials. Brian, take it away.
First of all, the item listed, police department recognition for retirements, that's going to be carried to a later date. There was an error with scheduling. Secondly, as everyone's aware, the large storm yesterday affected a lot of Howell residents. Our emergency responders responded to over 50 incidents within about a 6-hour period that were storm-related. Just a few of the highlights. Our police department sustained some pretty significant flood damage in the basement, throughout their entire basement. We're working to remediate that now. Preventorium Road, we had an issue. Our DPW is out there today repaving a section of it. That should be reopened as of this point. Ramtown Greenville Road, there was a washout directly adjacent to one of the Monmouth County bridges. They're going to be evaluating it further. They have to get divers in the water to examine the footings of the bridge. That's expected to be closed for quite a while. We don't know how long yet, but probably several weeks at the least. Lakewood Allenwood Road, there was also a washout adjacent to the bridge. Monmouth County was extremely quick. They had crews out there all day today working, and I believe as of right now, that has now been reopened. They are going to have to close it at times in the future to do some other repair work, but at least the roadway is open. Several residents in Ramtown suffered some significant flood damage. We had DPW drop several containers, dumpsters, in the development for the residents to discard their cutting drywall out and getting rid of carpets, things like that. And that's about all I have for now.
Just, Brian, before we go on to other,
Yep.
I just want to say I had the opportunity to tour the area today with you in the Ramtown section, and unfortunately, we have some experience in this. We suffered some flood damages in the past, but I just want to commend all the first responders, police department, Office of Emergency Management, your office, Jim Herman's office. I mean, the response was honestly impeccable and very quick. We did get to speak to some residents today that were very appreciative of everything that we've done, including, as you said, put the dumpsters in. I do know the county was also very instrumental coming to probably two busy roads for the Ramtown section and getting on that right away. DPW over at Preventorium. So it was a team effort, and everyone really exemplified, their profession and how things should be done.
Yep.
The only other thing is, I do believe OEM will be taking charge of dealing with the residents, correct? So,
That is correct. We've had various departments fielding calls. I sent out a directive earlier today to all the departments. Those calls are going to be funneled to my office with Allison G. tracking them, so we'll have contact information to follow up
Good.
later on. Additionally, we did declare a local state of emergency yesterday during the day. That was followed up by the state's declaration earlier today.
yeah, that was very instrumental, and listen, it was good that the governor did that. It really does help, able to get some resources into Howell Township and hopefully some future money. So I know right now we're going through the damage assessment process. We told all the residents to document. That's critical. And again, I just want to extend a job well done to everybody, because it came quick and it came, fierce.
Yeah.
And nobody expected it, but I think within 2 hours, we had over 7 inches of rain, I think, was recorded. And no matter what you do, no matter, just the land and the ground just can't handle that, and unfortunately, these are the consequences, so,
And we had no storm-related injuries nor fatalities.
yes. Good job, thank you.
Next up, I have Andy Bayer here to provide an update on our COA settlement.
Yes. Thank you, Deputy Mayor and Mr. Manager. I am I am happy to report that following the governing body's adoption of a resolution in June of this year, which authorized myself to finalize a settlement agreement with Fair Share Housing Center, I am pleased to report that, in fact, has occurred. The township has, with the assistance of a very lengthy settlement conference that a number of governing body members, including you, Deputy Mayor, and the councilwoman also attended, along with the manager and Jim and Joe Clark here. The settlement is for 895 credits, affordable housing credits, and this is for a 25-year period from 1999 to 26. 1999 to 2025. I think the reason that I have recommended settlement to the governing body in this regard is for a number of reasons. One is that the Fair Share Housing Center, which is a participant in every municipality's affordable housing litigation, had expert report opine that Howell's fair share obligation was 1,368 units. The settlement at 895 represents a 473-unit reduction off of Fair Share Housing Center's expert report, and that's especially significant because if, with a typical 20% set-aside, if you had a 473 additional affordable housing unit obligation, that would represent a total of almost 2,400 additional total units. So this 895 number came about through, there was a 6-month trial in Mercer County held by Judge Jacobson, and she determined a statewide affordable housing need. And then based upon that result, her calculations were then applied to all of Monmouth County, and that number came out at 895 credits or units for Howell Township. I think litigation challenging that would be expensive and difficult, and most likely end up with a number at or above where you were or where we're settling at. So I do think that this settlement is a very good result for Howell Township. In terms of, and on the other side, to meet that obligation, you had almost 300 existing affordable housing credits from projects that previously had been approved. But what was particularly commendable about what the township was able to negotiate with developers is that we have achieved a 30% set aside from 3 developers. That meaning that for every, as opposed to the standard in the, as I was saying before, is for rental units, the standard is 15%, and for sale, it's 20%. And we have achieved with rental projects a 30% set aside. So there's a lot, and so like for instance, there are 3 properties primarily that will be included in the plan. One is called Zaback Properties, and for that project, there will be a total of 360 market units, but you're receiving 153 credits for that project, including bonuses. For the Turpac project, there'll be about 460 units, and you'll be receiving almost 200 affordable housing credits for that project. And for the L&M project, there'll be 260 units approximately, and you'll be receiving almost 140 credits. So while these are, so clearly the result of this settlement is to limit development as much as possible. As I've said to the public and to the governing body throughout the years, every municipality has a constitutional obligation to meet this number. It's been implemented and imposed upon the towns through the Fair Housing Act, by legislation that Trenton has imposed upon us. And so the best way to manage it is to limit your exposure, and you have done an extraordinary job doing that. And so that's where we're at. We're gonna, once the settlement agreement is fully executed, we will ultimately, the settlement will be reviewed by the court. There'll be a hearing before Judge Perry. It will be noticed. Any interested party can participate in that hearing as well and comment on the township settlement. I would anticipate that would be anywhere from 60 to 90 days from now, depending on the court schedule. And I'll obviously update you more as we proceed, but that's where it is right now.
Okay, thank you, Counselor. Jim?
Okay, just a few things tonight, Deputy Mayor. First, I'd just like to tell you that the Freewood Acres Sewer Project has received DEP approval to award that was actually received this afternoon.
Wasn't real.
So that's another huge hurdle. We actually have a pre-construction meeting scheduled for August 30th of this month, so in a couple weeks, and hopefully we'll be getting started shortly thereafter. The Bear Swamp Dam, tonight we're going to award a contract authorizing construction administration services and propose to go out to bid as soon as we get final sign-off from the DEP, which we've received 2/3 of the sign-off so far. Also, we have the Wyckoff Mills Sewer Project is New Jersey Americans project. That's going to start soon. I have a pre-construction meeting scheduled for next week, and at that time I'll have a little more detail that I can release about what they're actually doing for traffic control and things like that. That's going to install a new sewer main down Wyckoff Mills Road to replace an existing sewer main that has problems. So that's New Jersey American. We're not involved in the sewer main part, but we're going to clean up the curbs and aprons and things as we go, and then they're going to pave the road. So that'll be done. We're also looking into a few tracts of land for preservation purposes. We're doing some due diligence right now, and we'll give you more information as these progress. Finally, we had quite a bit of work yesterday and today. I had 3 of my building inspectors today doing damage assessments on the houses, and I wish we could say this is the first time we've done it, but it's not. Most of these guys were involved in Superstorm Sandy efforts, so we kind of know the drill. So we did that. We worked with the county very well. I was on the phone with Joe Attore numerous times about the county bridges. For them to get out to Lakewood Allenwood Road and the speed they did is pretty commendable on their part, so that was great. There was at least 8 county bridges that were overtopped that we're aware of. We're in the process of inspecting all of them. The county has certified those 8 that they knew were overtopped, and we've taken care of 3 of the problems so far, and the Ramtown Greenville one's going to be the extended time period. Other than that, it was just a very long day. And that's all I have.
Again, thank you. It was a good job, good response. Did we put anything out on social media with these roads? Is that going to be,
Yes, I will be putting it out. I literally got some of the updated information right before the meeting.
good? So just the public will know that the information will be on the township website.
Yes.
Lou?
I have nothing for the governing body.
Joe?
Nothing other than what we discussed in executive session.
Last but not least, Penny?
Changes to the agenda for this evening will be the removal of Ordinance 11.1, amend fee schedule, Chapter 139, Article 17. Remove Ordinance 11.2, amend fee schedule, Chapter 139, Article 9, fire prevention. Those are your 2 changes to the agenda.
Great. Okay, moving forward, that will get us to the consent agenda items and hearing of citizens' public comments. And the sign-in sheet, the first person on is Mrs. Barbara Dixell.
Wow, what are we, chopped liver? It's okay.
I do apologize. I do
okay.
apologize. As Barbara's coming up, I'm sorry. Councilman Walsh?
Just a couple things I needed to ask. Mr. Herman, I wanted to make sure that water lines are being put in with the sewer lines at Freewood Acres.
So that is affirmative. We have spoke to the water company numerous times. We have an application in right now with the DEP. We're trying to use their Environmental Infrastructure Trust, which is now called the I-Bank, for the same low-interest funding. We are essentially splitting the cost with the water company, 50-50, thereabouts. So we've given them a bunch of information, they've submitted it, and it's going through the review process at DEP right now. So it's not part of our contract, it's separate from that. It'll be, New Jersey American will be directly installing them with their contractor, but it'll all be done, they'll follow our sewer mains shortly after the sewer, is what we're hoping.
Before the roads are,
Oh, yeah, that's definitely.
just wanted to make sure.
Yep.
If you could, when you speak to Joe Attore again, thank him from me. He's done a lot of good things for Howell Township over the last 10, 12 years. A lot of times when things that went on, him and his staff have been instrumental in helping us get the roads back and the bridges and expedited. So I'm really I'm happy to hear that again, but it doesn't surprise me. He's
will
always
do.
been very responsive.
Yep.
And Deputy Mayor, I'd really like to thank you and the mayor. I know you had numerous meetings with some of the developers over this fair share in housing, which we all know is needed, but it's causes a lot of grief, no matter how you break it down at the end of the day. But I know that you and the mayor were instrumental in having meetings, getting them up from 20% set aside to 30% set aside, and it's what has to be done. So I'm sorry I can't be involved in it, but thank you, and make sure when you speak to the mayor, I want to thank her.
I will, and it wasn't an easy task. There were a lot of applicants that want to develop in Howell, and she's not here, but I would say that, she was a big part of getting to that 30%, because, let's face it, just on one number alone, you're saving over, 2,400 homes being built in Howell Township. Listen, this is no good outcome. There is no good outcome with this. We know it's a constitutional mandate and an obligation, and we could put out there what other town numbers are and how low compared Howell is. It's not going to make people happy. We understand that. But at the end of the day, we did the best we could with what we had to deal with, and that's what it is. So I'll pass that on to the mayor. Evelyn?
I can only say that I know that the 30% set aside was your endeavor, and you were very successful at that. And Howell Township, we really do commend you for doing that. And I thank you both for your tremendous support in selecting, for going along with this number and selecting these sites. So I know that these meetings, they're heartbreaking sometimes. But in order to save 2,400 homes on one site, that's remarkable. So I, too, thank you.
Okay. Mrs. Dixell, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Barbara Dixell, 628 Piazza Vittoria, Freehold, New Jersey. Before I start, I'll also say congratulations, because, as we all know, and maybe some people don't, when you fight affordable housing, it was mandated by the Supreme Court. When you fight affordable housing and you lose, you get builder's remedy. So, good for you guys. That's the last thing we need is builder's remedy. So, good for you.
Thank you.
You hit a home run. Literally. Before I even start, I need to ask Mr. Herman something. With reference to Wyckoff Mills Road, could you tell me what's going on, or a time schedule, or who knows what? Because
I'll know more next week.
Badly needed.
New Jersey American, well, it has nothing to do with the roads. New Jersey American has to replace a sewer main for their own reasons.
It's right in front of the villages.
And it's right in front of the villages.
It's
I
on
know.
Strickland, because we
It's-
were out there with the engineers. It was on Strickland, right there, but they're gonna go down the whole road by the post office too?
No, they're
They're
going
just
to
gonna do-
start just north of the Park and Ride facility
Okay.
and run it south along Wyckoff Mills Road in front of the villages, and they're going to go down Route 9, and they're going to tie into the MRSA interceptor line that is right next to the Manasquan River.
So you're not going anywhere near the post office or anything
Nope.
down there? Okay. Because at one point, we keep talking about the county community block grants. And one of these days, someone will give me some good news and say it's going to get done. But, anyway. Okay, so what I have to say is, today, August 14th, to the governing body of Howell Township from the Dixells. We live in Howell, we pay our taxes in Howell, and we should be entitled to help and services. The Villages has never been wired for Fios until now. After the Villages invited Verizon to lay fiber optic cable and install Fios. Verizon dug up the Villages and laid miles and miles of fiber optic cable to replace copper cable. Letters were sent to people who have Verizon landline phones, and we were told we have no choice. Replace the copper cable with fiber optic or lose your phone service. Attached is the OPRA that I was asked to file, which I did, after my conversation with Jean, the electric code person in Howell. Attached are photos and a full explanation of what took place. All we want to know is the work that was done, code, and if not, what are our options? A lot of villages' residents have the same problem. Please send the Howell Electric Code and a construction code person out to our house to see what was done. And I will show you, it's a nightmare. Here's the Verizon letter, use it or lose it. Here's my Oprah. This is the box. After filing, laying miles and miles of cable, digging up the villages, cutting off people's electric, cutting off wire, phone service, this is what we get. This stuck, attached to our houses, pulled in from fiber optic cables from the street. This is that. Then they dragged the copper, the fiber optic cable under the siding and drilled a hole through my house from the outside to the inside. Then here is this fiber optic thing in my dining room. Now my landline phone is in the kitchen. This is the fiber optic thing in the dining room, which they drilled through my house and put this in the dining room and said, this is it. Now, our phone bills, our Verizon phone bills have remained about $65. Our JCP&L bill went up $30 because this is plugged in 24/7. It's not fair. And this is the battery pack that they gave everybody. So if you lose your electricity, go plug in the battery pack. You know something? We should be entitled to help. Now, I did get, and I got a letter back from Jim Herman and a whole thing from the construction code. No, they're not coming out. You know what? And told me what to do with construction code. It's not fair. We live in this town. We pay our taxes in this town. We're getting murdered with taxes. We're getting murdered with school taxes. And this is not fair. Somebody needs to come out to my house to tell me what the hell they did. Is it code? Is it not code? Because they went and dug up the place. They drilled holes in it. They dragged wire in from the street. It's not right. It's not fair. So please comment. I need some help.
Mrs. Dixell, can you tell me what letter I wrote that said I'm not coming out?
You sent me construction code officials that the construction code thing, and I should go call them up. You know, the construction code, you gave me the electrical code, you gave me the construction code, because,
So there's no letter.
well, but
You inquired and I directed you to Gene to talk about electric? Is that what we're?
no, I spoke to him before I even filed the Oprah, and he told me to
Okay.
file the Oprah, which I did.
Okay.
He was a very nice guy, very nice guy. He said if he can, he'll come out, and because it needs to be looked at. So then I did, then I got the thing from you with electrical code, construction, and the construction code, and the New Jersey thing. I'm not going to do that. Somebody from our township, I pay enough in this town, I live in this town, 26 years, we're entitled to services. Somebody from your code department, please come out and tell me where we code or not code. I mean, you guys know enough to come out to someone's house to fine you when you're not code and you got a violation. But I'm begging people to come out and tell us what the heck is going on here and what they did to us and a lot of other people in the villages.
Does this fall under code? I mean, is there a code that Verizon, they came to
This
my
is
house,
this is
so-
a public utility.
Yes.
So I'm not really sure what Mrs. Dixell is talking about. Typically, they're doing FiOS installations all over the township, right? So they're running them in numerous developments. I know I get requests for people to ask them to run it in their development too. It's not my call. This is totally on Verizon. Now, depending on the type of construction, I do believe some of it requires permits. I'll have to check that for
I don't-
sure,
Well-
but I'm not really sure what Mrs. Dixell's
The villages,
asking.
we ask the villages, can you send your electrician people that you deal with over just to take a look? Sorry, it's not our problem, it's your problem. You go call FiOS. It's wonderful. You get wonderful help. You pay enough money in this town, you pay enough money in taxes, you pay, the school board is killing us, and all we want, come to my house and tell me if it's code. They drilled a hole through my house, They're drilled in the hole into my living room. My electric bills are $30 higher because of this. Please, somebody help us.
Okay, Barbara, you know me a long time, and I like to stay to the facts. So, one, I have it on my house. We're neighbors. It just came into my development as well. And what I don't understand is, I think you made a statement that they told you to use it or lose it.
Yeah, right.
So,
I have
I be honest with you, I had Fios, I wasn't happy with it, I just got rid of it. It just didn't meet my family's needs and standard.
How do you
So,
get
do you
rid of
have an
Fios?
option to go to Comcast or another provider?
Comcast is not in the villages.
Cablevision.
Cablevision?
Right.
So
You
there are.
you had Cablevision and you switched to Fios?
I have had a landline the 59 years that Jerry and I are married. We have had a
Okay, so-
landline in the kitchen.
Okay, so I think what's going on, and this is the same thing, I believe, that happened along the shore towns when Hurricane Sandy hit, right? Where they replaced the copper lines. When all the copper lines got washed out, they replaced them with fiber only. They said, we're not replacing copper lines anymore.
They're telling us.
And it typically,
Here's the letter from Verizon. You either replace it with the fiber optic or you lose your phone service.
I
right,
got
because
you.
the copper's no longer going to work.
For the landline. But cable, you still could have any cable company.
We don't want Fios.
I got
don't
you.
want any part of
But
it.
it's for the phone.
Right.
Correct.
Well, we have DirecTV.
Right.
This is strictly the phone,
For
my
the phone.
landline.
I got you.
And there are no permits from my office for that.
Right.
So, I am going to give you this, like I said, I need help, I would like, all we're asking, send somebody out, let them look at what they did, dig it up, they dug it up from the street, dragged it through the lawns, everybody's lawns. They had these huge wheels of fiber optic cable, they dug up the place, they cut the wires, they cut phone wires, they cut electric wires, they made a hell of a mess. But again, for the people who have Verizon and not Optimum and not one of these other things, and you got a landline, this is what they did. Just help us. All we want to know, what to do, what's code, what's not code. That's all we're asking for.
Evelyn?
Mrs. Dixell, did Verizon pull out of your community?
No, Verizon is there, but the villages, they came to the villages, and the villages treasurer and Rich Clayman gave them permission to
So
come in.
your
We've never-
HOA people
we've-
decided to bring it in?
We've never, ever had.
Could you have
Fios.
Verizon if you chose to today? Could you stay with Verizon?
I don't want them. That's been my landline. We have had Verizon for years. The
Yes.
bills are $64, they've stayed the same, but it's the electricity that's plugged in 24/7, that's now gone up $30 a month. Why?
Jim, not to belabor this, and Brian, maybe you could help with this. So, obviously, they did some work in the villages. Do we do any follow-up on any kind of work that they do? I mean, if they filed some permits, we're going to look at those permits, correct? And then Mrs. Dixell is asking, I don't think there are any other residents here from the villages, and I might be wrong, asking for the same request, but,
Oh, I'm sure there's a lot of very unhappy people.
yeah, but there's a difference between being unhappy versus whether you think there's a safety issue or there's something not up to code.
Yes, I think there's a safety issue, because I think my house is gonna burn to the ground with this damn thing plugged in 24/7.
Okay, so that's a separate issue. You don't like the service, that's one thing. Is there any mechanism in place that we could just check to see if,
I will talk to the code people tomorrow,
and you'll get back to Mrs. Dixell?
and I'll find out what the story is from our side. And then I will either have Mrs. Dixell called by them, or I'll give her Mrs. Dixell a call myself. And we'll see what's going on. But
Somebody just come out and look at what they did. They dug it, they dragged it under the siding from the street, before the box, they dragged it through it's under the siding. They put that box in, they dragged it further down under the siding, up there, drilled it through the outside of the building into, that, I'm sorry, I'm afraid. My husband and I.
But it's a fiber optic line, it's not an electric
No,
line.
it's-
There's no real
it's
energy
fiber-
going through the
No,
fiber optic
yes,
line.
It's plugged into an electric outlet.
The box on the inside is. Right.
I have a fear that my house is gonna burn down. Bless you, here it is.
Here, thank you.
We're very upset.
Okay, anything else, Ms. Dixell, on, or just
Um,
anything on the
No.
agenda?
no, except that, like I said, as much as you don't like it and you don't want to hear it and nobody else wants to hear it, you hit a home run with affordable housing and no one's happy about it. But the Supreme Court says you gotta have it or you get builder's remedy. So,
We understand that.
So you did what you had to do.
Thank you. Next on the list is Kathy McKee. Virginia and Virginia, there's three of you. Do you want to come up together for the sake of time? And
Come on, you come up too, let's go.
are you going to be the main person speaking, or everyone has? Okay.
I'm Virginia Woolley, 158 Belmore Boulevard, Farmingdale, New Jersey.
Welcome, thank you.
I'm a little disappointed because I see on the agenda that it's a discussion. I thought the council had made a decision
What decision?
what to do with the museum and who could be leasing the building if that was going to be the way it was going.
Evelyn, you want to chime in, or you want Joe to take it?
Joe, if you would give the report that you've,
Yeah, I can address that issue.
Please.
The issue with council's decision at this point, originally I was asked to look at some documents, and I was given a packet of documents, and I looked at them, and it looked like we had two validly organized, competing historical societies, each looking to work with these particular properties. Then as I learned more, I found that one of them, and I'll call it the old one, has ownership interest in the schoolhouse and a significant amount of the property in the Mackenzie House. So based on that, I can't make any recommendation to the council for liability reasons, because if there's a private property interest at stake, it's not, and council can't pick and choose at that point then how to deal with that.
Thank you.
Joe, if you'd just be kind enough to answer the question of who is the Howell Historical Society committee or group that will be recognized in this town? Because I believe it's the society itself that owns the schoolhouse.
Yes.
So it's important that, because originally this group had asked if they would be declared that group, which would entitle them to ownership of the schoolhouse. So it's important for the group to hear the legal background, why this could or could not be the case.
So like I explained, I think we have an original group there that now that has an ownership interest in the schoolhouse. And if council were to appoint this new group, it can't make the new group the owners of the schoolhouse, because then it's taking private property from the old group and giving it to a new group, and that's obviously a liability issue. In addition, it looks like there's some private property in the Mackenzie House that's owned by the old group, and for the same reason, it can't be taken and given to the new group to curate. So I think, and I understand that there may be some issues amongst all of the groups and that, but I think the best thing is if there's any way for the groups to sort of come together and come to a common understanding about how to deal with all of these issues, it's going to be far better off, because it's really a very difficult position for council to be in, to have to choose among these various groups. And I wouldn't recommend doing it based on what I know about who owns what in these various buildings and the buildings themselves.
When you say private, you're saying, referring to the Historical Society that's defunct for 2 years?
Well, I now have from them an EIN number that's from the IRS, and it's my understanding that that corporation owns the schoolhouse and some of the private property in the building. So, like I said, it's one of the things that I think if the two groups can work together somehow, and I understand that there's issues, but if there's some way for the groups to work together to come to a common understanding on how to deal with these particular parcels and this property, it's going to be much better off than if council has to pick and choose, because I can't make that recommendation to them, given the fact that there's private property here.
Are you aware that there are only 3 people in the other group, and there are 20 of us that want to help put the museum, get it open?
Well, that's
get a
certainly-
grant to make things better?
I understand that, and that certainly may be a factor in the groups discussing how to divide work in that. If you have 20 people, certainly then that's a lot of people willing to pitch in and
And
help.
5 of the 20 are past presidents of the Howell Historical Society. Originally, the society was Howell Historical Society and Committee. The committee was part of the group, and somewhere along the way, you got dropped out. I have a copy of the latest grant that I was hoping that the council would apply for a grant for the museum. Since we don't own it, we can't as a group, and we're not told we're able to do anything with it. I would like to give this grant to somebody in the township that could work on it.
You could give it to Penny,
Okay?
and a decision's going to have to be made, Mrs. Woolley. The grant, I believe, is 40,000, right? Or less?
No, they're up to matching funds of 7,500
7,500.
this year.
Okay. I think matching. I think right now, one of the issues we're facing is that reports indicate that somewhere in the neighborhood, and Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, 250,000 was estimates from Mazer or whatever engineering? I just
think
want
it
the
was-
number.
No, I think it was less than that,
100,
but it was in
that's why I
phases.
said, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I
The
don't
total.
remember. I don't remember the exact numbers now. I can pull it up.
It was a significant number.
Now, the
So,
furnace is shot too, right?
the furnace, structural, and all that kind of
Well,
stuff.
that's because the township hasn't,
I don't want to
disagreeing
dispute
with you.
why the town or what. You know, it's easier on that side when you sit on this side and you have to make the decisions of what you fund, and that's just the way budgeting goes. So, needless to say, there is still an expense, and that's going to be the decision of the governing body, based on the number that we've received from our professionals. So it may be premature to go after that grant if $7,500 is not going to make matching, 15,000 a significant impact. That's a decision the council make, but I do appreciate, and Penny will take that document, and that decision will have to be discussed once we get the numbers.
I have copies of a letter I have come across in my records from May 1982, and it's from Jesse McKenzie's lawyer to the township lawyer, and it does say that the house goes back to the family if it isn't in his historic site. Right now, it hasn't been for 2 years, as far as I'm concerned.
Would you mind sharing that letter and?
I have copies for the council also.
Okay, thank you.
My last question is, who would the McKenzie's family contact here in Howell? Would it be the lawyer or
I'm sorry. Who is
township
going to?
lawyer?
If there has to be communication with the McKenzie family? Yes.
Okay. That's it, thank you.
No, I have a question.
Kathy, can you just
Kathy
please- yeah,
McKee,
thank you.
35 Merrick Road.
Go ahead, you could.
Oh, he's distracted. Oh, I just had a question for you because it was my understanding, and I have had no access, obviously, to the legal documents involved, but with the McKenzie house, it was my understanding that part of what the parking lot they have there now, that belongs to Alaire, and then the rest of it belongs with the house, and the house is owned by the township, and there was a lease agreement with the Old Howell Historical Society, and I never saw that either, but it was my understanding that the agreement was supposed to be renegotiated, and I don't know that it was, and I don't know that there was any formal renewal, or even if that's required, but I just don't understand what you're saying, that it's private property, and that's why, nothing can be done.
Sure. So it's my understanding that the schoolhouse is not owned by the township.
Correct.
And it's my understanding that a lot of the personal property in the McKenzie house is not owned by the township. The
That's
house
correct
itself
also.
may be, but
You mentioned property, I thought you used the word, am I wrong?
property includes, like, property.
Oh, okay,
Not
I
just the
thought
real
you
estate.
meant the house and the land.
No, not real estate. It's mine,
Clarified then.
okay, then there's a clarification. It's
Yeah,
some of the
I-
belongings in the house, and I have no idea how many belong to an entity other than the township.
Correct. They were donated to be used for the house. I imagine that if you're going to have the house torn down or given, I don't know what you're doing with it, but that would have to be decided separately, that you couldn't just blow that up with whatever they're using to demolish it.
Well, and on top of it all, I have this letter now that I have to factor into the mix, and I don't know even how to begin to do that just yet.
we're not going to handle that today.
Okay, well, I just thought that the ownership of it should be cleared up, and, if there is some kind of restriction on demolishing it because of the family having an interest in seeing it perpetuated as a museum, that would have to be dealt with.
Exactly. I'll have to take a look over the letter and
I think you created a misunderstanding about private ownership. At
yeah,
least
not
with
not
me.
real estate, not real property, but personal property.
Thank you.
Good evening, Virginia Krasinowski, 108 Minocqua Road, Freehold. Thank you for listening to me again this evening. When we talk about the two different entities and the entity that owns the property and the building, I just want to make it clear that all of the people that are here and the 20 people that we're referring to were members of that original group. We want to work with the current group. The current group has disowned us, basically told us we're not allowed to be members of that organization. And as a subsidiary of the Howell Township, I don't know. When we stand here, we're shocked to hear you say like a corporation or a separate entity, because we always thought we were part of this community. And we don't understand how a nonprofit organization representing this town can tell us we can't be members and we can't help.
Well, as a corporation, it has a separate existence, and part of that existence includes the ownership of property,
I
which
understand.
it does. And so for the township to tell the new group, yes, you can have the schoolhouse, we can't do that because we don't own it.
No, I understand, and that's
And
clear.
the same thing with the personal property in the Mackenzie house. And again, now I have this letter to consider, so
Right.
I think the state of the facts surrounding this house are sort of in a bit of a whirlwind.
But to
And so
say-
all the more reason why I wouldn't be comfortable in making any kind of recommendation to the council about which group is which.
My question is, does the council have a moral and ethical dilemma when its residents are not allowed to be members of this organization? This is not it's a nonprofit organization that's here to help Howell. You have 20 people that want to help Howell, and we have a few leading members, trustees who changed the bylaws, told us we could not be members, we could not pay dues to that organization, we're not allowed in the building. It just seems to me that this is illegal. And
It is a dilemma.
It's a serious dilemma
It's a
that's going
dilemma.
on for decades.
I know. I've been up here for 13 years.
So just like this woman said, we're begging you, as our leaders, to do something about it. You can't. Legally, you can't.
I really don't know what to, if I knew an answer, I would have gave it 13 years ago.
It's just a shame because the purpose of this organization is to preserve and protect the property. And as all of us were here when the McKenzie family gave that house, we knew that basement flooded. We knew it needed to be pumped every day. We knew it was on the water. It was a mill site. And so by having leaders that sat there and let that building rot, you now have $100,000 worth of work that you have to do, which is absolute negligence because they knew what to do. And being one of the people that donated property to the inside of that building, I want my property back. It's probably moldy. They have not preserved or protected Howell Township's property. Tell them to get the heck out. They should not be leaders of that organization. And how do they get control and maintain control when you have a citizens group begging you to just tell them, step down? They're not here tonight. They're not representing your side of the case. We're here begging for help.
But even if we did that, which we can't do tonight, there's still a factor of getting that building into a safe condition. And I haven't heard from anyone up on the council during a budget hearing that did that. So I understand what you're saying. We all understand. This has been going on for many, many years. The Hatfields and the McCoys, we know it.
No,
Okay.
it's the Hatfields and the nobodies,
Well-
because we're not fighting them. We want to work with them. They won't allow us to.
All I'm saying to you, the elephant in the room is still the fact that the building is unsafe, and a decision has to be made whether we give it back to the Mackenzies, whether the future governing body decide to put the money into the building and have it repaired, or whatever else they negotiate.
Right.
So,
So I do.
no decision could be made today, but we
Right.
have to keep in mind, even if the governing body was to make that decision against advice from our attorney, you couldn't do anything with the building right now.
Right, I understand that. And to be frank, and my friends are not going to want to hear this, I don't think the building can be saved. I think the building's going to have to be torn down. But there's still the question of the society and the schoolhouse and the property within the building that can be saved. And the longer it sits without the collections being removed, you know, there's supposed to be temperature and humidity control. These things are supposed to be being preserved. So if that building is not safe, those items need to come out and be stored someplace else. I'm sure the township has some location that there were accession records, there's donors, items were on loan. Some of the things that are in there are items that were lent from me. But if I stand here before you tonight and say, I want my item back, and I want it back by next Thursday, legally, I have the right to do that, but I don't have access to the building. So
There have
that's
been
something-
emails going back about, and there's been discussions going back and forth about taking the properties out of the building and storing them someplace else.
Well, this group would be happy to serve as catalogers and document that collection, see what items are there. Like Virginia said, we have 5 past presidents. We can tell you who gave most of those items, whether they're living, they're dead. So that's something that needs to be done. We're volunteers, we're willing to step forward and do that.
I thank you for that, that's commendable.
I can assure you, there are session books at the Mackenzie that delineate all of the things that were given to the museum or donated to the museum, and by whom and when.
Right,
So that
and-
documentation is in order still.
And a lot of those are ephemera. They're paper items that are significant items to the history of this town that are rotting every day they sit in that damp moldy building. So,
I have given this the best effort that I can,
Yes, she has.
and I'm still hopeful.
well, we appreciate your help and we appreciate everybody's consideration on the panel, but we ask that you act quickly to do something. If you can't save the building, to please save the collections.
That is the goal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Could I just quickly add
Sure.
something?
Yeah, I forgot to mention previously about the importance of the papers that are stored in that building. They're really essential to people doing genealogical research, and they shouldn't be considered property of 3 people who can't even manage the building at all. It's just a disgrace that that could be denied to people. I understand that the Monmouth County Library would be willing to help with having them available to the public, which is what they should be done. I don't think a single person who donated papers or books to that organization did it because they wanted 3 individuals to be able to hold on to this stuff forever and nobody else has access to it. They were donating it for the people of Howell and the surrounding area to be able to use for research.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Mrs. Dixell, before you do, because you already came up, I see
I have one sentence.
Sally Sandra.
I have one sentence, I already wanted,
Do you, Sally, you okay? Mrs. Dixell gets?
yeah.
Sure, go ahead, Mrs. Dixell.
one sentence. Barbara Dixell, 62A Piazza Vittoria, Freehold, New Jersey. We're only here 26 years. Gary was a member of the Historical Society. I'm asking, I don't ever want to hear from anybody's mouth that that building is going to be torn down. This is Howell Township's history. Give it back to the McKenzie family. God, do what you can. Please do not ever destroy that building. This is history. You wouldn't go into the White House and say, damn thing needs a new roof, we're going to blow it up and throw it down.
Some people may, Mrs. Dixell. That's not part of the discussion tonight. Mrs. Dixell, I hear you, and I just don't like when information gets put out that's not accurate. So that discussion is not part of taking down the McKenzie.
Give
There
it
was
back
a-
to the family.
There was a document, and if that happens, then that's what will happen.
Just give it back to the family and let them have it, that's all.
Thank you.
In order to save it, save it.
Thank you.
I just want to know where we stand now. We
The-
just wait till,
Until the attorney reviews the rest of the letters, and then the dialogue continues.
can I get in touch with the attorney, or do we have to wait for another meeting?
Absolutely.
You can contact me whenever you want.
Wonderful, thank you.
You're
Thank you.
welcome.
Just step up so we could just move this line and,
Sandra Stolly, Birdsall Road, Farmingdale. I want to agree with what Barbara Dixell just said.
thank you.
She's right.
Okay.
We need an historic element in this town, because as a tourist attraction, what do we have? The Russian church, the Kalmuk community, the reservoir. So what, we're going to have people come here to see Kmart or Target? So, yeah, we need to have a historic element in this town, and we've got the Preventorium, something should be done. They just had an article in the Asbury Park Press about Alaire, and how those people have raised $1 million a year to preserve that community from hundreds of years ago. They got 100-year-old buildings in there. We have a 160-year-old building that we want to see saved.
The problem with Alaire, the
Right.
difference is they have a trust fund that helps offset that. So we recognize the comments, we agree, and we're working towards those efforts.
Yeah, but they also raise money. They have fundraisers.
It was a great article, too. I read it also. It was a great article.
Excellent, excellent. And people that were involved in that, Brisbane and the Alaire,
Correct.
they were involved here with the Preventorium. They were here for the opening of the Preventorium.
That is correct.
They were here, so they have a connection. How it works, that's us. So what I wanted to say, we need, first of all, I have a couple of questions. An EIN, what does that do for anybody? Howell Historical was incorporated, had bylaws. Are those bylaws still in effect? Did
Yes, the
anybody-
EIN is a tax ID number, which
Yeah.
enables them to be a nonprofit and do exactly what you just said,
Well, what
fundraising.
about a 501(c)(3)?
That's all part of it.
Same
No,
thing.
not really.
The EIN
Yes, it
number
is.
is the number.
No, we had a separate EIN number. And
You can have separate ones, but they're almost identical. They're just used in a little bit of a different way. And please,
Historical was supposed to pay $25 a year to the state of New Jersey to keep the 501(c)(3) in effect. So for 11 years, it was not paid. It was allowed to go kaputzi. So and I called the Department of Treasury myself and asked them. I said, what is the story? They said it hasn't been paid for 11 years. They would have to pay that money back and reinstate $275. Now, I don't understand what's been done as of January 2018 that now these people think. Now, because Elaine Taylor and I and a couple of other people were the last legally elected officers. We were dismissed 6 years ago, not 2, 6 years ago. Evelyn was there, she knows. So if anybody's going to go in there and take control of anything, it should be the last legally elected, because there have been no members, there's been no quorum, no meetings, no attempt to collect money, no reminders, no newsletters. This has been 6 years of inactivity. And this is nonsense. Mrs. Woolley started that organization. She deserves to have it returned to her. It was her love and her dedication that created the McKenzie. It was her friend that she talked into donating it to the town. And that's just nonsense. So please, do something. And then I don't understand why. We had a picnic there about 5, 6 years ago. Somebody decided to come back here and pull the lease. We still had a legal lease, 35 years. We had time left on the lease. Somebody decided, oh no, we didn't honor the lease. We were never told that we had to maintain the outside of the building. We didn't have to replace the roof. I personally know there was $40,000 in the budget and that they replaced the roof for 11,000. So there was another 29,000 left out of that 40,000. It said in the budget
And
to
painted the exterior.
to paint the Mackenzie. So that's all I'm saying. The township was doing it. DPW was over there doing the maintenance. Trust me. They were
Deputy
doing
Mayor
it.
and I went to the county, okay, about that grant, what was it, 4 or 5 years ago?
4,500, yes.
Which Virginia Woolley was very instrumental in it.
Yes.
Yeah.
For the sake of time, because we have a busy
No,
agenda,
I understand.
rehashing the history
Yeah.
is all we know. So I'm just going to ask you, is there anything else you want to add that hasn't been
No,
already
I know is
repeated?
Maybe people watching this on TV don't know the history. Maybe they would want to know the history. Because like you say, 3 people cannot come in. We also own the barn. The cow barn in the back was purchased or given to the Howell Historical. It does not belong to the town. It's there and it has farming implements in it, old farming implements. So that's the story. We also have that old kitchen, summer kitchen stuck in the back of the schoolhouse. That belongs to historical also. But anyway, please, look at the papers, do what's right. But I say that the Howell Historical, the existing group, still has time left on their lease. It should have been renewed. Up until the time, 6 years ago, there were no structural issues, and all of a sudden, somebody decides, oh, there's problems. I was in that building for 20 years. I never worried about my health or my safety, and nor did anybody else. So please, open, and then $100,000. That's a little bizarre, okay? It's $100,000, Mr. Nicastro, okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Elaine Taylor, did you want us to come up?
Elaine Taylor, Maxim Southard Road. Excuse me. I've been appointed to the Preservation Task Force, and I'm not sure, and I'd like clarification, if any of that money for the preservation of land, is it ever available for historic buildings as well? Do you know? Does anyone know?
I do not believe so,
Oh, well,
Okay,
could we?
hold on. I
but
don't
I'm
know-
not,
I
I'm
don't
not
know
certain,
if it
so
is
Joe,
either.
would you know, or Brian, would you know? Does anybody know that question?
Okay, other than, is there direct wording that it can be used for that?
That I don't know off the top. of
So
my
we
head.
will check and get back to you.
I would appreciate if you could check on that, and,
Brian, please make note of that, and, okay,
because that may be the answer to the problem.
thank you.
I just wish that you would really, really listen to the pleas of the people that are here, because we are all passionate about history. We all are. And so much is being lost by these years going by, not giving the public what they deserve, a notable history of our town. So just look deep in your heart and try to see if you can move forward in a positive way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Virginia Krasinski, 108 Minocqua Road. I originally, before this house, lived at the Charles Wesley Patterson House on Adelphia Road that was built in 1859. We took that house that was ready to be demolished by Hovnanian, and we restored it, and we've since sold it. But at the time we restored it, we wanted to put it on it's the only house in Howell Township eligible for the state and national register of historic sites, other than the Russian Orthodox Church, and this is the only house. So the town was very interested in having that done, and we were very interested in having that done. But there was a big expense to complete the application. So I had done all of the research. The regular cost for an application is about $6,000, because I had done the research and we just needed someone to write it. The Historic Preservation Group approached the township and they approved $3,000 so that the money could go to have this application done. And the person that we contracted with didn't come through and never completed it. So I do know that funding has been taken from that historic preservation open space area and been put aside to help preserve historic houses. And even this was a privately owned home by me, but it was significant to get that house on the National Register because it's the only remaining one in Howell Township. And unfortunately, that did not happen. We've sold it to new owners, but I know, I can testify for a fact that money can be taken from that account and put towards the preservation of us.
You may be talking about two accounts, but we did give direction that they will research this, and then we will get back to an answer.
And
Thank
with
you.
all due respect, you don't know whether it was done and was allowed to, you just know that it happened. And there's a difference at times in life.
Well,
The
it was-
governing body might have allocated $3,000 to do it,
Right.
okay? It doesn't mean it came from the preservation money
Or the open space.
Well,
or the open space money. You don't know that.
Well, the head of the preservation group stood before a town council with me and asked that funding from that area be taken, and they publicly approved $3,000 for that to be spent
Okay.
within that budget year. So I'm assuming what was verbally said publicly, that that is the case.
I'm not sure that ordinance about raising through taxation the money to preserve with open space is for anything like that. But I could be mistaken.
Okay, well, it was a
Okay.
preservation group that did that, so
Okay.
just so you're aware.
We're going to look into that.
Thank you.
Jim, do you want to add something?
Yeah, Deputy Mayor, I just want to say that Mrs. Taylor, as part of her appointment to the Preservation Task Force, most of the funding that we're looking at is from the State Farmland Preservation Group, so this would not qualify for the money. We do have funding currently available, and we are looking for farms to preserve, but this would not qualify for that pot of money. Now, I'm not saying there's not other pots of money out there, but for the money that we do have for farmland preservation, this would not qualify.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to close the public portion. And we have some business to do, some resolutions. Council, any discussion on any of the,
Make a motion to accept 9A1 through 9A18.
before we second that, I just do have one clarity, I'm sorry. Shared service agreement with Farmingdale. Shared services is a big component to us. I know we're dealing with DPW, right?
That's correct.
Can you just give a quick overview of what those shared services may entail?
This particular agreement is for bulk pickup for a limited time. Apparently, there's been a longstanding agreement between the two towns. They do reimburse us our employees' hourly rate that has worked. So apparently, this has been in existence for many years.
Okay, so just for public edification, it's bulk pickup, and should any other services be agreed upon in the future, there's always that open
Yes.
dialogue. Okay. Do I have a second or any other discussion?
I'll second. I'm sorry, Councilman Walsh, were you including 9B1 with your motion?
No, because we got to put somebody in, so I want to put that separate.
Then I will second the motion to 9A18.
Roll call, Mrs. O'Donnell?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Was I to call Mrs. Smith prior
Yes.
to this? I do apologize. You want to take
Please.
5 seconds, get her on the line? I just realized that. Okay, we have no service on this phone.
Plugged in? Double check the wire in the back's plugged in.
Yeah, I got on the ground in my dress.
No, I mean the back of the phone.
Well, on the phone itself, it does say no service.
We're down.
Oh, is it? Oh,
Yeah, if we can't get her, then,
Paging John.
I was gonna say, just talking to the mic.
everyone-
Ask John Cordell to walk in here.
John Cordell, please come to the main meeting room. John Cordell.
That might have been what happened to your computer before.
No, seriously, that was an issue. It's up and running now, and the recorder's on. But there was something a little bit flaky with that.
A little flaky?
Flaky? I don't know. No service.
okay, let's move forward.
Move
There's
forward?
no, yeah, there's
We're gonna
no,
go, okay.
so we have a first and a second.
Yes, I
Roll
do,
call.
and I'm going to take a roll call. Mrs. O'Donnell?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro?
Yes. 9B1.
I would like to make a motion to accept the resignation of former Mayor William Gatto from our planning board with our deepest gratitude for his many years of work. And in my motion, I would like to incorporate moving Mr. Tom Boyle up to that unexpired term, Mr. Seaman as alternate 1, and Mr. Everett as alternate 2.
I'll second that.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. O'Donnell?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro?
Yes, and I just want to echo, I served with Mayor Gatto for many years on the planning board. He was an asset, will be missed. I know he doesn't watch this meetings because he lived it for many years. But I will call him, but
Is it working?
he was a very, very good member of the planning
We
board.
might be done with the meeting.
Okay,
I get a charge out of that, because I've been up here for a little bit. I used to watch every single person that left the governing body saying, I'll be here to hold you accountable, I'll watch every meeting on TV. And then I would see them and say, did you see the meeting the other night? They'd all say no.
no. Okay, we have public
Oh, my
hearing on
God.
ordinances. 10.1, let's go.
What is this here? This is what I was talking about last night.
Yeah, they crossed out that the ordinances was going to be voted down. There's no need to.
The adjustments were made?
So that's all.
Or Jim?
Yeah, I'll give a quick explanation on that. We had originally included a number of changes to the ordinance, to the fee schedule, and between last meeting and this meeting, we saw that there had been 1 or 2 fee changes that had been omitted. But rather than pull this ordinance and reintroduce it with the other changes, we can just pass this tonight, and then to the extent we need to re-amend it with those small changes, we'll do that later.
Okay.
Very good. Okay. Ordinance number O-18-16, introduced and passed on first reading on July 17, 2018, and published according to law, is now being taken up for further consideration and public hearing. Affidavit of publication of this ordinance in the Asbury Park Press issue of the 7/2018 is submitted, and it is noted that a copy of the ordinance has been posted on the bulletin board in the municipal building, and that copies were available to the general public upon request. Can you please read the title of the ordinance?
An ordinance of the Township of Howell amending Chapter 139, Article 17, Sections 34, 35, 36, 37, 40, and 41 of the revised general ordinances of the Township of Howell.
Wait a second.
Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak upon this ordinance? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public portion and ask a council member to make a motion.
Okay, I'd like to ask a question. Mr. Herman, we've spoken some about this through the years, okay? Is this am I to understand if this has to do with the trees taken down, or?
No.
No.
This ordinance 10.1 is related to the land use fees related to development. So it had been many years since we've updated our fees. I had some extensive work done to compare 5 other large towns around the area to find out where we fit with all the rest of the fees, and we tried to bring them up to current standards to cover the costs of effort that my staff puts out to process a lot of these applications. The other thing was we're changing a lot of the escrow fees, and that was to bring it more in line with what actually gets charged. So we went on the low end, but we're still trying to bring it up to a little more accuracy of what the consultants that do the reviews for our planning and zoning boards are actually charging for these types of applications.
So it's not a pass-through fee? When the professionals who are hired, we pay them a fee, it's not passed directly to
It is.
the user?
So the applicant will post an escrow fee. The consultants will review the applications because we don't have the staff internally, right? So we hire outside consultants for that, which is fine. And then they will submit bills to us. We review the bills, make sure that we agree that everything is where it should be. And then the finance department will cut checks to the consultants out of the escrow accounts. So we don't actually, we just hold the money in a, interest-bearing account.
So who had the major problem with this? Was it the consultants?
I did, actually.
Okay.
Because our fees, our escrow fees were not nearly close to what the consultants were charging. So I got tired of telling people that it would only be $1,000 in escrow to do a simple application when the consultants were charging $4,000 and $5,000 to do the reviews, right? So we figured, let's bring it up to be a little more accurate based on the level of effort provided by our firms, okay? So that when the people come back to me and say, well, wait a minute, you told me it was only gonna be $1,000, now they're up to $4,000 and I haven't even been heard yet, right? That reflects bad on me and my staff.
Okay, so do you think that the consultants are being egregious, or do you think that the fees were drastically low?
I think the fees were low. I'm not gonna say that the consultants were egregious.
Well, you just
but
went from
I've given-
1,000 to 4,000, 5,000.
well,
To me, that's a big jump.
I've given you an analysis of the last 3 years of all the different fees that were charged to those escrow accounts, okay, to show you, let's say, what was actual versus what was submitted. And what you're finding is that, maybe there's a process or two we can talk about with the boards to somewhat lower some of these fees, okay? Separate hearings or things like that, that we can combine into one hearing instead of making them come back for multiple hearings. I think there might be ways to reduce that. A lot of, go
We
ahead.
can talk about that with some smaller projects.
Well, we did that already, and that, we implemented that when I first started. And we have been using that, it's limited, but it's meant to be limited. It's meant to be, a perfect example is Christie's Italian Grill put a freezer box on the back of the building, right? Did they really need to come back to the planning board to put a freezer box on a concrete pad connected to the building that's on the existing parking lot? No, right? Is it really reasonable for them to spend $4,000 and $5,000 in escrow charges to do that? It's not. So we were able to create that ordinance, in probably 2013, that says they can just come to my office and bypass that and do the conditionally exempt site plan. It has to meet all the different requirements, so I can't just approve whatever I want, right? But yes, we tried to do that for the small things. Wendy's across the street did the exact same thing. So that has its purposes, okay? But this is more of, it's tough because sometimes you get bad plans. Right? You'll get submissions. Sometimes, I'm not saying that all engineers out there are bad, but sometimes you get people that submit plans that never should have been submitted.
And they alter. And they don't tell you how much they were altered.
And
Well, one of the problems is, and we have, this governing body has implemented some mechanisms that do save some fees for things that just were ludicrous. And I think moving forward, one of the issues that we faced at the planning board is our sign ordinance. And I did send an
Correct.
email out as the Class 3 saying that we have to review that ordinance. We have people coming in changing signs and have to come before the planning board when they're the same size or, there's no mechanism in place. So that's something moving forward. The concern I have, Jim, what I don't understand is, I don't want to hurt the resident that has to come in, that goes before the zoning board and then wants to appeal the zoning officers or get an interpretation, and they got to put up a $2,000 fee. I think we could pass this, but there has to be a mechanism in place, because one size doesn't fit all. So someone who might want to come in for an interpretation of something minor, but still has to come in for an interpretation, is going from, it has to lay out $2,000, and it's for an interpretation. So,
See, that's what part of my conversation came from.
sure.
I had somebody say something to me that, it costs too much to put in an application, this, that, the other thing. I said, it depends on who it is. I don't hear many residents complaining. I said, but if it was residents, I would be much more apt to listen to what they, and try to absorb it and see what was the best route to go. I mean, I've never heard a builder say, thank you for charging me fees and for going to the planning board and going to the zoning board. I've never had a builder say that to me, so it really wasn't my concern But I do worry about the residents.
I mean, I can give you some real quick ballparks to show you what I'm talking about, and not all of these are great, but you're talking about an appeal, let's say. So the appeal was I believe, a $250 fee, and that's for our staff to process the application, okay? And then the escrow was $750, right? That's what they had to post. The first appeal I come to, the actual amount of escrow paid at the end was $4,400.
So it was the fee paid, not the
No,
escrow.
that was the escrow. So the escrow, the initial escrow deposit was $750. That's all we required by our ordinance.
Okay,
The amount that they had to pay was $4,400. Okay? The next one, $750, they paid $3,400. The next one, $750, they paid $3,900.
now why are we so low as compared to what the actual cost was gonna be at the end? It almost looks like listen, I'm just talking as a consumer here. It looks like I went in for a car, saw that $179 cost for the car, and they tell me, no, it's $440.
This is the way we've always done it. Nobody wanted to change it. Remember, we don't have a planner on staff, so this comes down to me and really my land use officer, who's been instrumental in putting a lot of this together, Matt Howard, and also Eileen Urbano, the Planning and Zoning Board Secretary. I mean, she's way out of her realm of what she really signed up for, but she's fantastic. I mean, she put together all these analyses for me.
Jim, I don't think we're disputing that.
Yeah.
On the surfaces, listen, we know that the fees have not they've outpaced the times, right? Professional fees go up, things go up, so these probably should be reviewed more often than they have been.
Correct.
Again, I think we could make arguments on both ends, I know I can, whether the fee should be a fee versus, that's part of the employee's duties anyway. They're here, we're paying through their taxes. We'll hear that. I think at some point, we're gonna have to review this, or the council should review these fees probably more often than every 5-10 years, so that it don't outpace inflation. But we have to have a mechanism in place, let's just use an interpretation, because you gave me the appeal, but an interpretation typically doesn't have that kind of review. And now we're saying, okay, you gotta put up $2,000 for fees and escrow, to do that. And I worry about the resident that has to do that, And I don't count commercial and businesses, people's money, because they work very hard for their money as well. And many businesses don't make the money that we tend to think they make, but
So
we have to be conscious of both our business community and our residents. And I'm just suggesting that at some point, we're gonna have to review this more often.
Well, I don't disagree with that. And I think we can probably, moving forward, now that we've cleaned this up quite a bit, we can probably look at it a lot easier moving forward, because now we've dove into it the first time. But the same problem with interpretations. I mean, the first interpretation I come to is $3,900, fee $750. Or, the initial escrow deposit
The upfront was
$750.
$750, and it cost
Right.
$3,900.
The next one is-
$3,900 was a fair price, Jim. I mean, I gotta ask you, you're the one asking me to raise these fees. So I have to ask you.
I think we can have some conversations with our consultants to talk to them a little bit about how some of this gets done. And I think I need to probably have some conversations with the boards themselves to come there and explain what is happening and maybe better ways to do it. Maybe there's a little more efficient way. Instead of doing a separate waiver hearing for the planning board, why can't the waivers be granted or denied right there at the beginning of the meeting and then have the meeting?
It should be. We've had this conversation. Submission of waivers, to me, is ludicrous.
So,
It's a waste
right
of
now,
time,
that's.
a waste of money.
So right now, our engineer and our planner and our board attorney are the ones that are, let's say, setting these meetings up and directing the staff of what to do.
Joe, that's a
So-
policy, that's a function of this governing body.
Yeah.
Quite honestly. So with all due respect,
Yeah,
at
no,
the next
but-
meeting, I'm requesting that we have something in place to deal with that submission waiver.
Yeah, I'm not biting because now you just, and I'm not, no matter who it is, the three entities that you just mentioned are the same people on the end receiving the consulting fees. Is that correct a lot of the time?
Correct.
It's almost like the cart's pulling the horse. So, you know what, we need to either come up with a better way or find some cost-saving measures for the residents and the businesses. I mean, my number one concern, and I may be shunned for saying this, isn't how much money all the consultants get. It's just not my number one concern. Okay?
Let's say that I've had some not nice conversations with a few of our consultants over the years that hasn't been received very well, to say the
Oh,
least.
you know what, I mean, it's one of the reasons I was always an advocate for having an assistant to you, so more of the stuff could have been done in-house to save the consumer, whether it be the business or the Howell resident, money. Okay? It's one of the reasons I was always an advocate of it. I can't sit here and tell me, other than somebody charged 400 to 500% more than you initially asked for, that I could warrant raising how much they have to put up. Now, they have to put up this money, is that correct?
Correct, up front.
So they gotta put up 400 to 500% more in a lot of instances from what they put up now. Is
And the
that
current,
correct?
and the current system is, so they put up to 750.
Right.
Then every month or week, however, they get a bill saying, hey, come to the town
Give us
and,
more.
and put more money in this escrow or your application doesn't get heard. So you anticipate you're gonna spend $1,000 and then
Yeah, it skyrockets.
some, you get an email, you get a letter in the mail saying, put up more money. And sometimes you don't plan for that.
And you're saying that the escrows that you're about to ask us to approve are lower than a lot of the neighboring towns what they're asking for the same things?
Well, no, they're lower than what we're seeing bills for, right? Now, they're, in comparison, they're right in the middle of the road compared to other towns, okay? So, for instance, if we're talking about a bulk variance, the escrow fee that I'm proposing is $2,000,
Okay?
right? And looking at my spreadsheet here, the first bulk variance I come to is $3,250 for what the escrow was actually charged. So I'm not looking to cover all of it. I'm looking to get these numbers a little more up to today's standards, which I think definitely needs to be done. But I shot on the low end of every single one of them.
But I'll tell you where the mistake is, in my opinion. If you're gonna get to that number and not try to hold the professionals and the office to that number, all we're doing is saying, okay, put up 2,000, but you're still gonna have to come up and spend, another 2,000 because that's what our
So
cost
that-
analysis shows.
So that's exactly part two of the conversation that we're having right now is, I still think we need to raise these fees. I honestly do. I don't think they're anywhere near what they should be. However, the second part is have the policy discussion that says, okay, planning board, let's start combining some of these meetings. They have a technical review committee meeting where they go over all the specifics. Do we really need to have that, or can that be combined into another regular meeting?
Correct.
Right? You have a waiver hearing where you make all the professionals come and do the waivers, and then they leave, and then you hear the next case. When the zoning board, let's say, with different professionals, will do the waivers right in the beginning of the meeting and say, okay, we'll give you 5 waivers, one of them we're not gonna give you, so you're gonna have to adjust your plans for that, but let's hear the case and let's hear everything else you have to say. That way, when a group brings their professionals, a lot of them are high-priced attorneys, they're paying on their own side too, remember? And they can get that all done in that same meeting. That's gonna just reduce everybody's overall cost, right? Now, every applicant has the right to challenge the fees that are charged, but let's say not many of them ever do.
There's a review and it's a process and DCA is involved. Jim, I'm not disagreeing that the fees have to be, but it has to be, like you said, two-part. We have to get the system to get in line with these fees. Because just to up the fees so that we don't look bad and say, well, initially we told you 700, but it's really 4,000. So we're gonna do 2,000, but it's still gonna be 4,000? that is not good business. It's not good business for the town, it's not good business for anyone. So,
So I basically need to have the conversation with both boards, and the consultants need to be given policy direction that's coming from you, through me, to them, to say, you have to listen, you have to not cut these down.
listen, you have a
Okay.
Class 1 and you have a Class 3. The mayor and myself currently serving. So we will do that, but I just want to make sure that we engage in that conversation. So,
I agree, 100%.
I suggest to the council, we support this ordinance right now, but it has to have that conversation, that
It
other
needs to be
element.
changed
has
more
to
than
be
just
changed.
this.
Yes, I agree.
If we're all on board with that, I'll support this ordinance right now. Deputy Mayor?
Did I read the title?
Yes, we're
Yeah.
up to,
You're up to a second.
We're up to,
Does the-
no, we're up to somebody from the governing body.
correct.
So I need a council member to make the motion.
Motion to ordinance number O-18-16 be finally passed and adopted. Notice of its passing and adoption be published in the 8/17/18 issue of the Asbury Park Press by reference to its title only.
Second, please.
Second.
Roll call, Mrs. O'Donnell?
Yes?
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro?
Yes. That brings us to 10.2, ordinance number O-18-17, introduced and passed on first reading on 7/17/2018 and published according to law, is now being taken up for further consideration and public hearing. Affidavit of publication of this ordinance in the Asbury Park Press issue of the July 20th, 2018 is submitted, and it is noted that a copy of the ordinance has been posted on the bulletin board in the municipal building, and that copies were available to the general public upon request. Clerk, please read the title.
An ordinance of the Township of Howell amending Chapter 139, Article 35, Section 86, Building, Plumbing, Electrical, and Fire Subcode Fees of the Revised General Ordinances of the Township of Howell.
If there's anyone from the public that would like to speak before this, on this ordinance, please step forward. And seeing none, we'll close that public portion.
I'd like to make a motion that ordinance number 01817 be finally passed and adopted, and that notice of its passage and adoption will be published in the August 17th, 2018 issue of the Asbury Park Press by reference to its title only.
Second.
Roll call.
Mrs. O'Donnell?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro?
Yes. Ordinance number 10.3. Ordinance number O-18-18, introduced and passed on first reading on July 17, 2018, and published, according to law, is now being taken up for further consideration and public hearing. Affidavit of publication of this ordinance in the Asbury Park Press issue of the July 20, 2018 is submitted, and it is noted that a copy of the ordinance has been posted on the bulletin board in the municipal building, and that copies were available to the general public upon request. Title, please.
An ordinance of the Township of Howell amending Chapter 139, Article 9 of the Revised General Ordinances of the Township of Howell.
If anyone from the public would like to speak on this ordinance, please step forward. Seeing none, we'll close the public portion. Council, please.
Motion to ordinance number O-18-18 be finally passed and adopted. And the notice of its passing and adoption be published in the 8/17/18 issue of the Asbury Park Press by reference to its title only.
Second.
Roll call, Mrs. O'Donnell?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro?
Yes. Ordinance number 10.4. Ordinance number O-18-19, introduced and passed on first reading on July 17, 2018, and published, according to law, is now being taken up for further consideration and public hearing. Affidavit of publication of this ordinance in the Asbury Park Press issue of July 20, 2018 is submitted, and it is noted that a copy of the ordinance has been posted on the bulletin board in the municipal building, and that copies were available to the general public upon request. Title, please.
An ordinance of the Township of Howell amending Chapter 139, Article 38, Section 89, Fees that may be waived of the Revised General Ordinances of the Township of Howell.
If anybody would like to speak on this ordinance, please step forward. Seeing none, we'll close the public portion, and
Motion that ordinance number 01819 be finally passed and adopted, and that the notice of its passage and adoption will be published in the August 17th, 2018 issue of the Asbury Park Press by its reference to its title only.
Second.
Roll call, Mrs. O'Donnell?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro?
yes. 10.5. Ordinance number O-18-20, introduced and passed on first reading on July 17, 2018, and published, according to law, is now being taken up for further consideration and public hearing. Affidavit of publication of this ordinance in the Asbury Park Press issue of July 20, 2018 is submitted, and it is noted that a copy of the ordinance has been posted on the bulletin board in the municipal building, and that copies were available to the general public upon request. Title, please.
An ordinance of the Township of Howell amending Chapter 139, Article 5, Section 9, copies of maps and bid specifications of the revised general ordinances of the Township of Howell.
If anyone would like to speak for this ordinance, please step forward. Seeing none, I'll close the public portion.
Motion to ordinance number O-18-20 be finally passed and adopted, and notice of its passage and adoption be published in the 8/17/18 issue of the Asbury Park Press by reference to its title only.
Second that?
Roll call, Mrs. O'Donnell?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro?
Yes. Continue to move on. Ordinance 10.6, ordinance number O-18-21, introduced and passed on first reading on July 17, 2018, and published according to law, is now being taken up for further consideration and public hearing. Affidavit of publication of this ordinance in the Asbury Park Press issue of July 20, 2018 is submitted, and it is noted that a copy of the ordinance has been posted on the bulletin board in the municipal building, and that copies were available to the general public upon request. Title.
An ordinance of the Township of Howell amending Chapter 139, Article 13, Sections 22 and 23, Chapter 139, Article 20, Section 63, and Chapter 139, Article 36, Section 87 of the revised general ordinances of the Township of Howell.
Anyone would like to speak on this ordinance, please step forward. Seeing none, we'll close it.
A motion that ordinance number 01821 be finally passed and adopted, and that notice of its passage and adoption be published in the August 17, 2018 issue of the Asbury Park Press by reference to its title only.
Second.
Roll call, Mrs. O'Donnell?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro?
Yes. 10.7, ordinance number O-18-22, introduced and passed on first reading on July 17, 2018, and published according to law, is now being taken up for further consideration and public hearing. Affidavit of publication of this ordinance in the Asbury Park Press issue of the July 20, 2018 is submitted, and it is noted that a copy of the ordinance has been posted on the bulletin board in the municipal building, and that copies were available to the general public upon request. Title.
An ordinance of the Township of Howell amending Chapter 226, Plumbing of the revised general ordinance of the Township of Howell.
Thank you. Anyone would like to speak for this ordinance, please step forward. Seeing none.
Motion to ordinance number O-18-22 be finally passed and adopted, and notice of its passage and adoption be published in the 8/17/18 issue of the Asbury Park Press by reference to its title only.
Second?
Roll call, Mrs. O'Donnell?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro?
Yes. Ordinance number 10.8. Excuse me. Ordinance number O-18-23, introduced and passed on first reading on July 17, 2018, and published according to law, is now being taken up for further consideration and public hearing. Affidavit of publication of the ordinance in the Asbury Park Press issue of the July 20, 2018 is submitted, and it is noted that a copy of the ordinance has been posted on the bulletin board in the municipal building, and that copies were available to the general public upon request. Title.
An ordinance of the Township of Howell amending Chapter 252, Article 3, Water Utility of the revised general ordinances of the Township of Howell.
I'll open the meeting if anyone would like to speak on this ordinance.
She's coming.
Sandra Solly, Birdsall Road, Farmingdale. I just want to ask a question. These two last things you just did, it says to delete it in its entirety and reserve it for future use. What's that all about?
I think the township attorney gave us that explanation before. Joe, would you like to repeat that?
Sure, what happens here is because these are no longer needed, they're deleted, and then if in the future a new chapter is going to be enacted, it's there to be used.
Oh, so plumbing and water and sewer and not,
In its existence as it was, are no
Accurate.
longer.
I was just curious because I was confused. It's like, what? Okay,
Correct, it's
that's all.
not going to be replaced with anything at this time, it's just being deleted.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Close the public portion. Desire of the council, please. Motion.
Motion that ordinance number 01823 be finally passed and adopted, and that notice of its passage and adoption will be published in the August 17th, 2018 issue of the Asbury Park Press, and reference to its title only.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Roll call, Mrs. O'Donnell?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro?
Yes. 10.9, ordinance number O-18-24, introduced and passed on first reading on July 17, 2018, and published, according to law, is now being taken up for further consideration and public hearing. Affidavit of publication of the ordinance in the Asbury Park Press issue of the July 20, 2018 is submitted, and it is noted that a copy of the ordinance has been posted on the bulletin board in the municipal building, and that copies were available to the general public upon request. Title, please.
An ordinance of the Township of Howell amending Chapter 281 of the Revised General Ordinances of the Township of Howell.
Anyone would like to speak on this ordinance, please step forward. Seeing none, can I have a motion by the council?
I just want to understand something, Mr. Herman.
Yes.
On this ordinance, when the issues, you need to get your permit from the Board of Health in order to put a pool in?
No, this is for commercial pools,
Oh, okay.
not non-residential, so.
Non-residential.
Right, so your Candlewood Swim Club, your Howell Point Swim Club, those types of
Yeah, I
facilities.
just saw that when I was reading this.
Yeah, the Swimming Pool Code of 1955 has not been in place for a long time.
55, I wasn't even born yet.
Told you we're trying to clean up our ordinances.
Did I get a motion? Was there a
Motion that ordinance number O-18-24 be finally passed and adopted, and the notice is passed and adopted be published in the 8/17/18 issue of the Asbury Park Press by reference to its title only.
Second?
Roll call, Mrs. O'Donnell?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro?
Yes. 10.10, ordinance number O-18-25, introduced and passed on first reading on July 17, 2018, and published, according to law, is now being taken up for further consideration and public hearing. Affidavit of publication of the ordinance in the Asbury Park Press issue of the July 20, 2018 is submitted, and it is noted that a copy of the ordinance has been posted on the bulletin board in the municipal building, and that copies were available to the general public upon request. Title.
An ordinance setting forth and amending, supplementing the salary range schedule for the salaries of certain officers and employees of the Township of Howell.
Thank you. Before I open it to the public, is it appropriate at this time, have you announced who that coordinator, is this for the Alliance?
Yes, Deputy Mayor, it is. You
Would
can
it be
announce it.
appropriate, or?
Sure.
Can you
She's
please?
accepted the position as a start date. It'll be Krista Riddle, who's been a longtime member of the Alliance.
Very active, efficient member of the Alliance. I didn't know that she accepted. I think that is fantastic. What a terrific asset I think she'll be in that position.
A great pick as well. I know how active she is. She was responsible for doing the preventive news or publication monthly, I believe.
Yes.
She is going to be a great asset, and I have to tell you, a good pick. So,
I did see her at the National Night Out, and she was quite excited to begin this post, so that was nice to hear.
good to hear. I did not see her and missed her, but I will send my congratulations to her.
Yeah, I will too. I just think that's fantastic. I think she'll be a tremendous asset to the people of Howell in that position.
Very dedicated. Anyone would like to speak upon this ordinance, please step forward.
Sandra Solly, Birdsall Road, Farmingdale. Is there an accurate figure that you're willing to set the salary at? Is there a figure, not a guess, in between a range? Is there a figure?
There was a range, according to this ordinance, 40 to 60. I think the manager could tell you what the salary
lower,
was set
right?
at. And I do know part of this salary is paid by grant.
That's correct. Off the top of my head, I don't remember the exact salary that we're paying her. You want to call me tomorrow, I can get it.
The grant was like 45,000.
This was formerly a part-time position.
Right.
We're restoring it to a full-time position, so we had to pass this ordinance to make the salary appropriate
It's
for,
going to be like 8:30 to 4:30,
Full-time.
punch a clock?
Full-time.
Just checking. Just checking, because there was a debate about hiring 2 part-time people to save money.
Correct.
because of the grant, so I was just curious what was happening here. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? I'll close the public portion.
A motion that ordinance number 01825 be finally passed and adopted, and that the notice of its passage and adoption be published in the August 17th, 2018 issue of the Asbury Park Press by reference to its title only.
Second, please.
Second.
Roll call, Mrs. O'Donnell?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro?
Yes, for the public, we pulled 11.1, 11.2. We are now going to 11.3. This is an introduction of ordinance. Can I have a council member read the motion to introduce?
Motion to introduce ordinance number O-18-28 on first reading by title. In order the same be published in the 8/17/18 issue of the Asbury Park Press, together with notice of its introduction, and passes on first reading by title. That'll be further considered for final passage at the public hearing at a meeting of the Township Council, be held on 9/4/18 at 7:30 p.m. prevailing time in the municipal building.
Second?
Ordinance title, an ordinance of the Township of Howell amending Chapter 7, Schedule 1, no parking, and Schedule 4, time limit parking of the revised general ordinances of the Township of Howell. Roll call, Mrs. O'Donnell?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro?
Yes. I'll have some questions on this, but I'll get you, Jim, during the week.
I'll be ready.
Unfinished business, any, council?
Not from me, sir.
For informational purposes, the municipal offices will be closed on my birthday, September 3rd, 2018, in my honor.
Lucky you.
The next regular meeting is September 4th, 2018. Executive session will start at 6:30. Regular session will be at 7:30, and then we will have another meeting in September on the 25th, same times. Just for edification, it is Labor Day on September 3rd, but it is my birthday, so that's the
And then I'll be
official reason
announcing
for
that
close.
at the next meeting that on Columbus Day, which is my birthday,
Oh,
the
no.
offices will also be closed.
Can I have a motion to adjourn?
I need to
Motion to
tell you,
adjourn?
I will not be here for executive session on the 4th. I'm very involved in autism. I will be up North Jersey. I will be getting out about 6:30, and I will come here directly from there, but I will not be making executive session.
We will see if we need executive session before September 4th and let you know.
Okay, I just want to let you know in advance, I did not make it.
Okay. So I have a motion to adjourn?
And-
Mrs. O'Donnell, second?
Second,
Roll call, Mrs. O'Donnell? Mr. Walsh?
yes.
Mr. Nacastro?
Yes, everyone get home safely. Good night.